A racist gym owner denies a black man's membership because he wants to keep a certain image for his gym. However, his plan backfires on him the next time he sees the black man. Daniel Taylor stepped through the glass doors of Whitman Elite Fitness, the chill of the air conditioning hitting him as he crossed the lobby. His steps were steady, purposeful. He'd heard about this place. A pristine gym, boasting the latest equipment and a dedicated clientele. It was the best in town, and Daniel had been saving up to join for months. Now, standing here, he was ready to take his training to the next level. The receptionist, a young woman in a crisp white polo, looked up as he approached the counter. Daniel gave her a friendly nod. "I'm here to inquire about a membership," he said, his deep voice calm and confident. She hesitated, her smile faltering for just a second before it returned, tighter than before. "One moment," she said, picking up the phone and speaking softly into the receiver. A moment later, the gym's owner, Derek Whitman, strode out from an office in the back. Derek was a stocky man in his late 40s, wearing a designer polo and gym shorts that looked more expensive than functional. His jaw was set in a way that made Daniel think he'd been in a lot of arguments, and won most of them. Derek's eyes flicked over Daniel with a glance so brief it could have been mistaken for casual, but Daniel caught it. He'd seen that look before. "Can I help you?" Derek asked, stepping behind the counter with the air of someone who didn't have much time for conversation. Daniel extended his hand, offering a polite smile. "Daniel Taylor, I'm looking to join. Heard good things about this place." Derek looked down at Daniel's hand for a second too long before shaking it, his grip firm but not welcoming. "We're very selective here," Derek said, his tone already holding a note of dismissal. "Our memberships aren't just about fitness. We provide a certain atmosphere." Daniel kept his smile, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "I can respect that. I've been a trainer for years. I'm just looking for a place to focus on my training." Derek raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "It's not just about skills, Mr. Taylor. We cater to a specific type of clientele, people who value privacy and exclusivity." There it was. Daniel had been waiting for it, but it still stung when the words came. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hand on the counter. "I can afford your membership," Daniel said, his tone still even. He wasn't about to back down. Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's not really about the money." Daniel knew where this was going, but he asked anyway. "So, what is it about?" Derek's gaze shifted, briefly scanning the room before returning to Daniel. "We've had issues in the past with certain members not fitting into the environment we've created here." Daniel straightened, his voice low but firm. "What exactly are you saying, Derek?" Derek's eyes flicked away again. "Look, it's nothing personal, but our members are particular about who they train with. You might find that the environment here isn't suited for you." Daniel felt his patience slipping. He'd heard these coded words before. They were always wrapped in politeness, always vague enough to avoid direct confrontation. He wasn't in the mood for a dance around the truth. "I get it," Daniel said, his voice calm but pointed. "You're saying I don't belong here." Derek's smile finally disappeared, replaced with a tight frown. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to," Daniel replied, his tone steady. Derek took a step back, his discomfort growing. "Look, if you're going to make a scene, I'll have to ask you to leave. We have a reputation to maintain." Daniel felt his pulse quicken, but forced himself to stay composed. "I'm not making a scene. I'm just asking for a membership." Derek's face hardened, his voice colder now. "We reserve the right to deny service, and I'm denying you service. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security." There it was, the threat, the final nail in the conversation. Daniel held Derek's gaze for a long moment, feeling the weight of the insult, the subtle racism that had now become blatant. He'd come here expecting to work on his fitness, not to be reminded of where people like him were allowed. Without another word, Daniel turned and walked out of the gym. As the doors closed behind him, he let out a slow breath, the cool air from inside lingering on his skin. His muscles tensed, not from the workout he'd hoped for, but from frustration. This wasn't new to him, but today felt different. Today, something in him had snapped. He was done waiting for spaces like Whitman Elite to let him in. If they didn't want him there, he'd make his own space, a place where everyone belonged. Later that day, Daniel sat across from Julia Morales at their usual spot in the local cafe. The aroma of coffee and the quiet hum of conversation filled the air, but Daniel wasn't paying attention. His hands wrapped tightly around his cup, though he hadn't taken a sip since he sat down. His mind was still back at Whitman Elite Fitness, replaying Derek Whitman's words. Julia, wearing her usual vibrant crop top and leggings, eyed him curiously from across the table. She had known Daniel long enough to sense when something was off. "So, you gonna tell me what's got you in a mood? Or are we just gonna sit here staring at cold coffee?" she asked, a teasing smile playing at her lips. Daniel let out a breath, shaking his head. "You ever been somewhere and just Known you weren't welcome? Before anyone even says anything? Julia raised an eyebrow. All the time. But what happened? I went to that gym, Whitman Elite. Figured I'd join, maybe get some serious training in. Daniel began, still gripping his cup. The second I walked in, I could feel it, like I didn't belong there. Julia leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Did someone say something? Daniel let out a low laugh. They didn't need to. It started subtle. You know, the usual, we're very selective nonsense. But when I didn't back down, he straight up told me I didn't fit in. Then he threatened to call security. Julia shook her head, anger flashing in her eyes. Derek Whitman? That guy's trash. He's been pulling that exclusive clientele garbage for years. Only rich white people get through those doors. Daniel nodded. Yeah, I picked up on that. What did you say to him? Julia asked, her voice softening slightly, though the fire was still there. I called him out. But what was the point? Daniel shrugged. He wasn't listening. He was just waiting for an excuse to throw me out. Julia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. And you're still sitting here mad about it? Come on, Daniel. That guy's not worth your time. Why waste your energy? I'm not mad at him, Daniel said quietly. I'm mad at the fact that I let myself think I needed a place like that I needed his gym. I've been a trainer for years. I could build something better. Something that's actually for people like us. For everyone. Julia's eyes lit up. Now that's what I'm talking about. You've been thinking about this forever. You don't need his fancy equipment or his overpriced membership fees. You've got the skills, Daniel. You've got the drive. Maybe, Daniel muttered, his doubts still gnawing at him. But it's not that simple. I'd need a space, equipment, clients. It's a lot. I'm not even sure where to start. Julia leaned forward again, her tone firm but supportive. You don't need to have it all figured out right now, but I know you, Daniel. When you put your mind to something, you get it done. You're not doing this just because of Derek Whitman. You've been wanting to do this for years. He just gave you the push you needed. Daniel looked down at the table, considering her words. She was right. It wasn't just about Derek. This had been brewing inside him for a long time. This need to create something of his own, something real. Derek's rejection was just the final spark. I can't do it alone, Daniel said after a long pause. I'll need help. I've never run a business. Julia grinned. You know I've got you. I've been helping clients with marketing for years. We'll get your name out there, spread the word on social media, and you've already got a reputation as one of the best trainers in town. People will come to you. You just need to give them a reason. Daniel finally took a sip of his now lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. He looked up at Julia, a small smile creeping onto his face. You really think this could work? I know it can work, Julia said confidently. And once people see what you're building, they're not going to want anything to do with Derek's gym. You'll offer them something real, something they can't get anywhere else. Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the decision settle over him. He'd spent years training clients in other people's gyms, always dreaming of having his own. But there was always something holding him back. Fear, uncertainty, the idea that he wasn't ready. Now, that hesitation felt smaller, almost insignificant. Julia was right. He didn't need to wait for permission or approval. He had everything he needed to build his own gym, a place where people wouldn't be judged by how they looked, how much money they had, or who they were. He set his cup down with finality. All right, let's do this. Julia grinned, her energy infectious. That's the Daniel I know. I'll start looking for spaces tomorrow, Daniel said, already planning his next steps. Something in the city, somewhere accessible. And I'll start working on a marketing plan, Julia added. We'll build this thing from the ground up. Daniel nodded, feeling a surge of determination. This gym, my gym, it's going to be different. No more being told we don't belong. Julia raised her cup in a toast. To Daniel Taylor's gym. Daniel clinked his cup against hers, his smile widening. To the future. For the first time that day, Daniel felt the tension in his body ease. The anger from the incident at Whitman Elite Fitness hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more productive. He wasn't just reacting to Derek's rejection anymore. He was moving forward, on his own terms. As he and Julia left the cafe, a sense of purpose filled him. The next chapter of his life was just beginning, and this time, he was in control. The clatter of tools and the hum of a small fan filled the empty warehouse. Sunlight streamed in through high windows, casting long shadows across the cracked cement floor. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, hands on his hips, surveying the space. It wasn't much now, but he could see it. His gym, the place where everything would change. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, glancing over at Julia, who was hunched over a tablet, scrolling through inventory lists. The space was bare, but he could imagine it full of people. People like him, who just wanted a place to train without judgment. You sure about this spot? Julia asked, glancing up from her tablet. She wore her usual workout gear, leggings and a tank top, hair tied up in a high ponytail. It's got potential, but it's definitely a fixer-upper. It's perfect, Daniel replied, his voice filled with quiet confidence. It's got the bones. Just needs a little work, that's all. Julia raised an eyebrow. A little work? Daniel, this place needs more than a fresh coat of paint. The plumbing alone, we'll figure it out, Daniel interrupted, his gaze fixed on the far wall where he imagined a row of punching bags hanging. This is the right spot. I can feel it. It's in the middle of the city, easy to get to. The community around here is growing. We can make this work. Julia sighed, but nodded. I trust you. I just hope you're ready for a lot of late nights. I've been ready, Daniel said with a grin, walking over to a pile of equipment they'd just bought. A few secondhand treadmills, some free weights, and a couple of benches. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As Daniel bent down to move one of the benches into place, a voice called out from the entrance. Yo, Daniel, you in here? Daniel straightened up and turned toward the door. Tyrone Brooks, a young man from the neighborhood, strolled in. A grin stretched across his face. Tyrone was tall and built, the kind of guy who could motivate a room just by walking into it. He wore a sleeveless hoodie and track pants, his usual workout gear. I heard you were finally opening your own gym, Tyrone said, his eyes scanning the empty space. Looks like you're putting in some work, man. Slowly but surely, Daniel replied, nodding. You coming by to help or just here to check out the competition? Tyrone laughed, walking over to clap Daniel on the back. You know I had to see what you're building. Plus, I figured you could use a hand. Daniel smiled. Always can use another set of hands. Grab that end of the bench, will you? Tyrone didn't hesitate, lifting the heavy end of the bench with ease and carrying it over to where Daniel pointed. Julia glanced up from her tablet, giving Tyrone a nod of acknowledgement. Gotta say, man, Tyrone said as they set the bench down, this place is gonna be real. We don't have anything like this around here. It's always the fancy places on the other side of town, charging an arm and a leg just to walk through the door. That's why I'm doing it, Daniel said, wiping his hands on his jeans. This isn't going to be one of those places. I want people to feel like they belong here. Tyrone nodded, his expression serious. You're gonna change the game, Daniel. People like me? We need a place like this. Ain't nobody looking out for us over at Whitman Elite. I've been there, tried to sign up once. They looked at me like I didn't belong. Daniel looked at Tyrone, their shared experience hanging between them. That's exactly why this gym is happening. People are tired of feeling like they're not good enough. We're going to give them something different. Julia chimed in from her spot, still focused on the logistics of getting everything ready. Speaking of which, Daniel, we need to finalize a name. I've got to start building the website and getting the word out. Daniel thought for a moment, then smiled. What do you think of the community gym? Julia looked up, considering it. Simple, straight to the point. It works. Tyrone nodded. Yeah, man, it's perfect. That's exactly what this place is going to be, a community. Daniel felt a wave of satisfaction. He'd been thinking about the name for a while, and it felt right. This wasn't just about fitness. It was about building something that would last, something that people could rely on. Tyrone grabbed a rag and started wiping down one of the treadmills. You got a timeline for opening, or are we just going to keep dragging in more old equipment? Daniel laughed. A couple more weeks, if everything goes according to plan. We've still got a lot of work to do, but we're getting there. Let me know if you need anything, Tyrone said, tossing the rag over his shoulder. I'm serious. I'm down to help however I can. You sure you're not just angling for a free membership? Julia teased, her eyes sparkling. Tyrone grinned. Hey, if it comes with some perks, I won't say no. Daniel smiled, appreciating Tyrone's energy. You'll get your membership, and I might even throw in a few personal training sessions. Now you're talking, Tyrone said, flexing his arms with an exaggerated grin. Just trying to stay on your level, man. Daniel chuckled, but felt a deeper sense of pride. Tyrone wasn't just joking. People like him needed this space. And not just for fitness, it was about community, about feeling like they belonged somewhere. As the afternoon light began to fade, Daniel and Tyrone continued moving equipment while Julia worked out the final details for their launch. The gym was starting to take shape, the bones of a dream finally coming to life. By the time they finished for the day, Daniel stood in the center of the room, looking around at what they had accomplished so far. It was still a long way from being ready, but he could see it now more clearly than ever. The rows of weights, the machines, the people who would come through those doors. This is it, Daniel said quietly, mostly to himself. Julia walked up beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. It's happening, Daniel. You've already done the hardest part. You've started. Tyrone stood on Daniel's other side, hands on his hips, looking around the room with a wide smile. This place is going to be packed. You watch. Daniel felt a surge of determination. Yeah, it is. As they locked up for the night and stepped out into the evening air, Daniel knew this was just the beginning. The community gym was more than a building. It was a promise to everyone who had ever been turned away, told they didn't belong. Here, they would always have a place. A few weeks later, Daniel stood in the center of the community gym, wiping his hands on a rag. The space had come together better than he could have imagined. The cracked concrete floor was now smooth, covered with rubber mats that stretched from wall to wall. The once bare walls were painted a fresh, clean white, and mirrors lined one side of the room, reflecting the equipment they'd managed to scrape together. A few weight racks, some second-hand treadmills, punching bags, and a simple stretchy. The open sign hung proudly in the front window, but as Daniel scanned the gym, it was empty. Quiet, too quiet. He had expected a slow start, but the reality of it was starting to weigh on him. Bills were already piling up, and the memberships weren't coming in as fast as he'd hoped. Julia walked in from the back office, where she'd been working on marketing strategies. She looked up, sensing his mood immediately. "Don't get discouraged," she said, her voice steady as she approached. She leaned against one of the weight benches, arms crossed. "It's only been a couple of weeks. Word will spread." Daniel sighed, tossing the rag onto a nearby counter. "I know. I just thought we'd have more people by now." "We've had what, 5 sign-ups?" "6, Julia corrected, holding up a finger. "And 2 of them are paying monthly. That's not nothing, Daniel. Give it time." Daniel nodded, though he couldn't help but feel the pressure building. Time was the one thing they didn't have in abundance. Rent, equipment payments, utilities, it all added up quickly. If more people didn't start showing up soon, they'd be in trouble. Before Daniel could say anything else, the front door swung open and Tyrone walked in, a wide grin on his face as usual. "Yo, what's up, fam?" he called out, his energy filling the quiet space as he headed toward them. "Place looks even better than last time I was here." Daniel smiled despite himself. Tyrone had become one of his most loyal supporters since day one. He'd signed up for a membership immediately, even though Daniel had offered to let him train for free for all the help he'd given. Tyrone refused, insisting on paying his way. "Just trying to keep it going, man," Daniel said, giving him a quick handshake. "You here to get some work in?" "Always," Tyrone said, flexing his biceps dramatically. "Gotta stay sharp, you know." Julia laughed, shaking her head. "You're something else, Tyrone." "Hey, I bring the energy," Tyrone said with a grin, already heading toward the weights. "You keep this place going, Daniel, and I'll be here every day. Trust me, people will come." As Tyrone started his warm-up, the door opened again, and a few more clients trickled in. An older woman from the neighborhood who had signed up earlier that week, and a young man Daniel recognized from a nearby construction site. It wasn't a crowd, but it was something. Daniel glanced at Julia, who gave him a reassuring nod before turning back to her work. She had been right to push him forward, to remind him why he started this in the first place. It wasn't about filling the gym overnight. It was about building something real, something lasting. But as the days went on, the financial strain became harder to ignore. A week later, Daniel sat at the small desk in the back office, staring at the spreadsheet on his laptop. Julia had helped him set up the finances, but no matter how much he stared at the numbers, they didn't look any better. They needed more clients, fast. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Julia stepped in, holding her phone up, an excited look on her face. "Daniel, check this out," she said, walking over and handing him the phone. "Remember that social media post we did last week? It's starting to pick up. People are sharing it, asking about the gym." Daniel took the phone, scrolling through the comments. Sure enough, there were dozens of likes and shares. People asking questions about membership rates and the gym's hours. "This is good," he said, feeling a glimmer of hope. "If we can get a few more sign-ups from this, we might be able to cover next month's rent." "We will," Julia said confidently. "We just need to keep pushing. I've been reaching out to some local businesses, seeing if we can partner up, maybe do some joint promotions. And Tyrone's been spreading the word to all his buddies too. It's only a matter of time." Daniel nodded, appreciating her optimism. She had been his rock through this whole process, always pushing him forward when his doubts crept in. He just hoped she was right. Later that afternoon, Daniel stood by the squat rack, adjusting the weights as a new client. Jamal, a tall guy in his late 20s, finished his set. Jamal had joined a few days ago after hearing about the gym from Tyrone. "You're doing great, Jamal," Daniel said, spotting him as he racked the barbell. "Keep it up." Jamal nodded, breathing heavily. "Thanks, man. Appreciate you taking the time to work with me." "No problem. That's what this place is about," Daniel replied, clapping him on the back. As Daniel moved to help another client, the front door opened, and he looked up, expecting another familiar face. Instead, a man in a business suit walked in, his expression unreadable as he scanned the gym. Daniel didn't recognize him. The man approached, holding a folder under his arm. "Daniel Taylor?" Daniel nodded cautiously. "Yeah, that's me. I'm from the city's zoning office," the man said, flipping open the folder. We've received a complaint about your gym operating without proper permits. Daniel felt his stomach drop. What? That's a mistake. We've got all the permits in order. Not according to the records, the man said, pulling out a piece of paper and handing it to Daniel. You'll need to resolve this within 30 days, or you'll be forced to shut down. Daniel took the paper, his hands tightening around it. His mind raced. Everything had been above board. This had to be a mistake. Who filed the complaint? Daniel asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer. The man shrugged. That information is confidential. Just make sure it's resolved. Daniel watched as the man left, his jaw clenched. He glanced at Julia, who had come over during the exchange. Derek, she said quietly, reading the look on Daniel's face. It has to be him. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, he's trying to shut us down before we even get started. That evening, after closing the gym, Daniel and Julia sat in the back office, going over the paperwork. Everything was in order, just as Daniel had thought. The complaint was baseless, but that didn't mean it wouldn't cause problems. He's scared, Julia said, flipping through the documents. That's why he's doing this. You're a threat to him, Daniel. He's losing clients, and he knows it. Daniel leaned back in his chair, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. I didn't think he'd stoop this low. We've barely started. Julia looked at him, her expression firm. That's exactly why he's doing it. He's trying to kill this before it becomes something bigger, but we're not going to let him. Daniel nodded, his determination returning. You're right. We'll fight this. We've come too far to let him stop us now. As they sat there, going over their options, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Derek might have tried to throw a wrench in their plans, but the community gym wasn't going anywhere, not if he had anything to say about it. A few weeks after the zoning complaint, things were starting to pick up at the community gym. Word of mouth spread faster than Daniel expected. The gym had grown from a few members trickling in here and there to a steady stream of people coming through the doors each day. The gym wasn't packed, but the energy was good. It was growing. Daniel was by the front desk, chatting with a few regulars when the door swung open. In walked Derek Whitman, his presence immediately shifting the mood in the room. Derek looked the same as he had the day Daniel first met him. Stocky, dressed in a polo and designer gym shorts that screamed privilege. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that set Daniel on edge. Julia, who was behind the desk, glanced at Daniel, silently asking if she should step in. Daniel shook his head. He wanted to handle this himself. Daniel, Derek said, walking up to him with a slow, deliberate stride. I've been hearing a lot about your little gym. Is that right? Daniel replied, keeping his voice steady. He crossed his arms, leaning back against the counter. People must be talking. They are, Derek said, looking around the gym. A lot of my clients have been talking too. Seems you've been pulling some of them away from Whitman Elite. Daniel didn't flinch. I'm not pulling anyone away. People are making their own choices. They come where they feel welcome. Derek's smile was tight, forced. Let's not pretend this is some noble cause, Daniel. You're running a business, just like I am, and you're targeting my clients. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Targeting? Derek, I've been open to everyone since day one. You might want to ask why your clients are leaving on their own. Derek's eyes hardened, his smile vanishing. You think you're clever, don't you? Starting up a rival gym right after I told you that you didn't belong at mine. What are you trying to prove? Daniel kept his voice calm, but there was an edge to it now. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just giving people an option you wouldn't. You made it clear I didn't belong in your gym, so I built my own. Simple as that. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping. This isn't going to last, Daniel. You can't compete with Whitman Elite. My gym is established, with years of reputation. You're just a guy who threw some weights into an old warehouse. People will get bored. They'll leave, and you'll be done. Daniel looked Derek dead in the eye, refusing to back down. We're not the same, Derek. You're running a place for people who care more about being seen than actually working out. My gym? It's for people who care about getting better, not showing off. And that's why we're growing. People don't want what you're selling anymore. Derek's face darkened, his frustration now bubbling to the surface. You don't know what you're talking about. Whitman Elite is the top gym in this city. You're playing in the big leagues now, and you're going to find out real quick that you're out of your depth. Daniel clenched his jaw, his patience wearing thin. You already tried to shut us down with that fake zoning complaint. Didn't work, did it? Derek's eyes flickered, a small confirmation that Daniel had hit the mark. That was just business, Daniel. Nothing personal. Right, Daniel said, his voice tight. And when this place grows even more, what's your next move? Because you're running out of cards to play. For a moment, Derek didn't speak. His eyes swept over the gym again, lingering on the people working out, people who used to be his clients. It was clear that he hadn't expected Daniel to succeed, let alone thrive. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, Daniel saw a flash of insecurity in the man's eyes. I'll say this once, Daniel. Derek said quietly, his voice low but firm. Back off. Stop poaching my clients. Stop trying to grow this place, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to keep your doors open for another 6 months. Push your luck, and I'll make sure this place doesn't last. Daniel felt his muscles tense, but he forced himself to remain calm. He straightened up, locking eyes with Derek. You can try, Derek, but I'm not going anywhere. This gym is here to stay, and you can't stop it. So if you want to compete, go ahead. But we both know people are leaving your gym for a reason. You're fighting a losing battle. Derek glared at Daniel for a long moment, then took a step back. You're making a mistake, Daniel. No, Daniel said, his voice firm. You did when you underestimated me. Without another word, Derek turned and walked out of the gym, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. Daniel exhaled, the tension slowly leaving his body. Julia, who had been watching the entire exchange, walked over. Well, she said, crossing her arms. That was fun. Daniel smiled tightly, though the adrenaline was still pumping through him. I figured he'd try something eventually. He's not going to make this easy. He's scared, Julia said simply, and he should be. People are leaving his gym because they're tired of his attitude. They're coming here because you built something real. Daniel nodded, but a part of him couldn't shake the weight of Derek's words. Whitman Elite was still a big name in the city, and Derek wasn't the type to give up easily. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Later that evening, Daniel stood in the back office, staring at the gym's financial reports. Things were looking up, but they weren't out of the woods yet. The confrontation with Derek had rattled him more than he cared to admit. The man's threats weren't empty, and Daniel knew that Derek still had the resources to cause trouble. Julia knocked on the doorframe, her expression soft as she stepped into the room. You all right? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, just thinking. You know he's bluffing, right? Julia said, leaning against the desk. He's losing clients left and right, and he's desperate. That's why he came here. He wants to scare you. I know, Daniel said, though the weight in his chest hadn't lifted. But he's still got more money and more connections than we do. If he really wanted to, he could make things hard for us. Julia crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. Maybe, but we've got something he doesn't. People. Real people who actually care about this gym. He can't buy that, Daniel, no matter how much money he throws around. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time since the confrontation with Derek, he felt a sense of calm. She was right. This gym wasn't just about business. It was about the community they were building. Derek might have money, but he didn't have that. You're right, Daniel said quietly. He can't take this from us. Julia smiled, a soft but confident smile. Exactly. So don't let him get in your head. We're going to keep growing, and there's nothing he can do about it. Daniel nodded, feeling his determination return. Derek Whitman could threaten all he wanted, but the community gym wasn't going anywhere. They were just getting started. The weeks that followed Derek's visit were a mix of progress and frustration for Daniel. The community gym continued to grow, attracting new members from all over the city, particularly people who had grown tired of the elitism of gyms like Whitman Elite Fitness. Every day brought a few new signups, and Daniel could feel the momentum building. But with that growth came the problems. It started small, minor annoyances that could be brushed off as bad luck. Orders for new equipment were delayed, and when they did arrive, pieces were missing or damaged. A couple of promotional events that Julia had organized were inexplicably canceled at the last minute, venues backing out without explanation. Then, there were the rumors. Daniel overheard a few members talking quietly by the water station one afternoon. I heard the place is under investigation, one of them said, glancing around nervously. Something about unsafe conditions. A friend of mine almost didn't sign up because of it. Nah, that's just people talking, another member replied, shaking his head. I've been coming here for weeks. Place is solid, but the damage was done. The rumors were out there, and Daniel knew exactly where they were coming from. Derek. One afternoon, a couple of weeks later, Julia burst into the office, a frustrated look on her face, holding a stack of papers. We've got another problem, she said, dropping the papers onto Daniel's desk. Daniel looked up from the membership files he'd been reviewing, eyebrows raised. What now? Julia sat down across from him, rubbing her temples. We got a call from one of our suppliers, Reflex Fitness. They're refusing to deliver our next order of equipment. Apparently they've been told we're not paying our bills. Daniel blinked. What? We're up to date on everything. I made sure of it last week. I know, Julia said, her voice tight with frustration. But they won't listen. They're saying they've heard we're having financial trouble and don't want to risk delivering equipment we can't pay for. Daniel sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Derek. Julia nodded, her expression grim. It has to be him. He's been trying to undercut us from every angle. If he can't get us shut down legally, he's going to starve us out by cutting off our supplies. Daniel shook his head, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. I didn't think he'd go this far. Julia leaned forward, her voice low and steady. Daniel, we knew he wasn't going to back off after that zoning complaint. This is his next play. He's trying to choke the business out. He wants us to fail. Daniel looked down at the papers, feeling the weight of what was happening. They had worked so hard to get the gym off the ground, and now Derek was doing everything in his power to sabotage them. He's scared, Julia continued. That's why he's doing this. But we've got something he can't take away. Our members. They're loyal, and they're spreading the word. Daniel nodded slowly. But if we can't get the equipment we need, if we can't keep the gym running smoothly, we will, Julia said, her voice firm. We'll figure it out. We've already come this far. There's no way we're letting him win now. Later that day, Daniel stood in the gym, watching as Tyrone led a group of clients through a circuit training session. The sound of weights clanking and feet pounding on the mats filled the air, and for a moment, Daniel felt a sense of pride in what they'd built. But the shadow of Derek's sabotage loomed large. Tyrone caught Daniel's eye between sets and jogged over, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Everything good, man?" Tyrone asked, his usual grin faltering slightly as he noticed the tension in Daniel's face. Daniel hesitated, then decided there was no point in keeping it to himself. "Derek's been trying to mess with us. He's spreading rumors, cutting off our suppliers, trying to shut us down." Tyrone's expression darkened. "That dude just can't let it go, huh?" "Nope," Daniel said, shaking his head. "He's getting desperate, but it's working. We're running into roadblocks left and right." Tyrone crossed his arms, his biceps bulging. "We're still here, though. You built this place from nothing, Daniel. You can handle this." "I appreciate that," Daniel said, managing a small smile. "But it's getting tougher every day. We can't keep running into these problems and expect the gym to survive." Tyrone looked around the gym, his eyes scanning the faces of the people working out. "You know why people come here, right? It's not just the equipment, it's the vibe, the way you make people feel like they belong here. Derek's gym never had that. He can throw all the money he wants at this, but he can't buy that." Daniel nodded, his mind racing. Tyrone was right. The gym wasn't just about machines and weights. It was about the people, the community they'd built. But they still needed the basics: equipment, supplies, repairs. "If you need help, man, let me know," Tyrone added, clapping Daniel on the back. "We're in this together." Daniel smiled, feeling a spark of hope. "Thanks, Ty. I appreciate that." The next morning, Julia was already at the desk when Daniel arrived. She looked up, her face bright despite the weight of the problems they were facing. "I've got an idea," she said as soon as Daniel stepped through the door. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it." "We're going to stop playing Derek's game," Julia said, her eyes alight with determination. "If he's going to try to cut off our supplies and spread rumors, then we're going to turn this into an opportunity." "How?" Daniel asked, intrigued. "By leaning into what we do best," Julia replied, leaning forward. "The community. Our people. We're going to organize a big open day, invite everyone in the neighborhood, get the whole community involved, and we'll make it a celebration of what the community gym is all about. We might not have the fanciest equipment, but we have something more important." Daniel nodded slowly, seeing where she was going with this. "We remind people why they come here." "Exactly," Julia said. "We'll invite local businesses to set up booths, offer discounted memberships, do some free fitness workshops, and we'll make sure the whole city knows that the community gym isn't just about the weights. It's about the people." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight on his shoulders lift slightly. "That could work." "It will work," Julia said confidently. "We've got the community behind us. Derek can't stop that." On the day of the event, the gym was buzzing with energy. People from all over the neighborhood filled the space, some working out, others mingling by the booths set up by local businesses. Daniel walked through the crowd, stopping to greet members, answer questions, and check in with the vendors. Tyrone was leading a free workout session in the corner, his voice booming with encouragement as he pushed the group to finish their sets. Julia was at the front desk, signing up new members and handing out flyers. It wasn't just a regular day at the gym. It was a celebration of what they had built, despite the obstacles, despite Derek. By the time the day was over, Daniel was exhausted but energized. They had signed up more than a dozen new members, made connections with local businesses, and most importantly, reminded everyone why the community gym existed. As Daniel stood by the door, watching the last few people trickle out, Julia walked over, her smile wide. "That was a success," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. Daniel nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "It was. We're not just surviving, Daniel," Julia said, her voice filled with pride. "We're thriving." Daniel looked around the gym, the space alive with possibility. Derek could keep trying to sabotage them, But Daniel knew now that they had something stronger than money or fancy equipment. They had each other. The open day had done exactly what Daniel and Julia hoped it would. It brought the community gym to life in a way that even they hadn't expected. Over the next few weeks, the gym buzzed with energy as new members joined, and old ones brought friends. The sense of belonging, the atmosphere they had worked so hard to create, was paying off. Daniel noticed the shift one morning as he walked into the gym, coffee in hand, to find it already full. A few months ago, he would have been worried about an empty room. Now, the problem was how to make enough space for everyone. Tyrone was working with a group by the squat rack, his voice booming with encouragement as they powered through their sets. Julia was at the front desk, helping two new members fill out their paperwork, her smile never fading. And throughout the gym, people from all backgrounds, different ages, races, fitness levels, worked out side by side. It was everything Daniel had envisioned, and more. But as the community gym grew, Daniel couldn't help but notice the other shift. Derek's gym, Whitman Elite Fitness, was starting to feel the strain. Later that day, Daniel was in the office when Julia came in, her phone in hand. She had that look on her face, the one that said she was about to drop some important news. "What's up?" Daniel asked, leaning back in his chair. Julia handed him her phone. "Take a look." Daniel scrolled through a string of messages from members, most of them saying the same thing. They had left Whitman Elite Fitness. The reasons varied. Some were tired of the elitism, others were fed up with the cold, unfriendly environment. But the pattern was clear. "They're coming here," Daniel said, not really surprised but still processing what it meant. "They're leaving Derek's gym." Julia nodded. "People are talking, Daniel, and they're saying the same thing, that your gym is the place they feel welcome." Derek's losing his grip. Daniel set the phone down, his mind racing. Whitman Elite had been an institution in the city for years, the go-to spot for the wealthy and connected. But Daniel knew that reputation only went so far. People wanted more than just status. They wanted a place where they belonged. "Is it bad that I feel kind of good about this?" Daniel asked, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Julia laughed. "Nope. You earned this, Daniel. You didn't just build a gym. You built a community. Derek can't compete with that." A few days later, the gym was packed, almost too packed. Daniel stood near the front desk, looking around the room. It was the middle of the day, usually a slower time, but not anymore. The free weight area was full, people were lined up at the treadmills, and the punching bags were getting a workout from a group of regulars. He hadn't expected things to grow this fast. "Daniel!" Tyrone called out from across the gym, jogging over to him. "We're gonna need more equipment, man. This place is blowing up." Daniel chuckled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Tell me about it. We've got more people than we know what to do with." "It's a good problem to have," Tyrone said, his smile wide. "But we're gonna need more space soon. People love this place." Daniel nodded, the pride swelling in his chest. Tyrone was right. The community gym had become more than just a place to work out. It was becoming a movement, a place where people from all walks of life came to feel welcome, to work on themselves without judgment. But just as Daniel was about to respond, the door swung open, and in walked a familiar figure, Derek Whitman. He looked different this time. Gone was the smug confidence he had carried the last time he visited. Now, there was something else in his eyes, something closer to desperation. He scanned the room, taking in the crowd, the energy, the life that filled the gym. And for a moment, Daniel almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Derek walked over, his jaw clenched. Daniel braced himself for another confrontation. But this time, Derek's tone was different. "So," Derek said, glancing around the gym again. "This is what you've built." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, this is it." Derek's eyes lingered on the packed gym floor, the sound of laughter and weights clanging filling the space. He didn't say anything for a long time, and Daniel could see the gears turning in his head. This wasn't the same man who had stood in this gym a few months ago, confident that Daniel would fail. Finally, Derek turned back to Daniel, his expression hard. "You think this is going to last?" Daniel met his gaze, his voice steady. "I know it is." Derek scoffed, shaking his head. "You think because you've got a crowd now, that means you've won?" "This isn't about winning," Daniel said, keeping his tone calm. "It's about building something real. People are tired of places like yours. They don't want to be part of something that makes them feel less than. That's why they're coming here." Derek's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Daniel saw a flicker of anger. But it wasn't directed at Daniel. It was aimed inward, at his own failure. "You don't understand," Derek said quietly, his voice laced with frustration. "Whitman Elite isn't just a gym. It's a business built over years. What you've got here, it's temporary." Daniel stood tall, refusing to let Derek's words shake him. "Maybe it took you years to build Whitman Elite, but you forgot the most important part: people. This place works because it's about more than just business. It's about giving people a place where they feel like they belong. That's why we're growing, and that's why you're losing members. Derek didn't respond immediately. He looked around the gym one last time, as if trying to make sense of it all. The pride he once had in his own gym was gone, replaced by a realization that no amount of money or exclusivity could compete with what Daniel had built. Without another word, Derek turned and walked out the door, leaving Daniel standing there, the weight of the moment settling in. Later that evening, Daniel and Julia sat in the back office, the sound of the gym still humming in the background. They hadn't talked much since Derek left, both of them processing what had happened. "Do you think that's it?" Julia asked, breaking the silence. "Do you think he's done?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. "I don't know, but I don't think it matters anymore. We're not worried about him. We're focused on what we're building." Julia smiled, nodding. "You're right. He can't stop what's happening here. We're only going to keep growing." Daniel looked at her, feeling the truth of her words settle in. Whitman Elite might have been the top gym in the city for years, but that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the community they had created, the people who had found a home at the community gym. For the first time since he started this journey, Daniel felt something new. He didn't need to compete with Derek anymore. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had already won, not by taking down Whitman Elite, but by building something stronger, something real. As the evening wore on and the gym began to empty out, Daniel stood by the door, watching the last few members leave. The future felt wide open, full of possibility, and for the first time, Daniel knew exactly where he was headed. Derek might have been part of the story, but the community gym was his legacy, and it was just getting started. The weeks following Derek's last visit passed in a blur. The community gym was thriving beyond anything Daniel had imagined. Membership had more than doubled, and the space was now buzzing with energy from morning till night. Daniel and Julia were already talking about expanding, maybe even looking for a larger space to accommodate the growing crowd. Daniel was in the middle of a training session with a group of new members when he noticed the familiar figure of Derek Whitman standing outside the gym's glass door. He was pacing, his face tense, a stark contrast to the confident, arrogant man who had once threatened to destroy Daniel's gym. Now he looked nervous, desperate even. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead and told the group to take a quick water break. As Derek finally walked through the door, Daniel felt a mix of emotions, curiosity, anger, but mostly a sense of calm. Derek had no power here anymore. Julia, who was at the front desk as usual, gave Daniel a look that said she didn't like this. Daniel nodded to let her know he had it under control. Derek approached, his steps slower, his eyes scanning the room with a hint of envy. The gym was packed, people working hard, laughing and supporting each other. The atmosphere was nothing like Whitman Elite. It was alive, genuine. "Daniel," Derek began, his voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." Daniel crossed his arms, standing tall. "About what?" Derek took a deep breath, his eyes flicking around the room again. "Look, I've been thinking about everything. The way I treated you, the way I ran my gym. It's clear that I made a mistake." Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for Derek to continue. "I've lost a lot of members," Derek admitted, his voice strained. "More than I ever thought possible. People are leaving Whitman Elite, and it's because of this place. They want what you've built here. I get that now." Daniel watched Derek closely. This was the first time Derek had ever admitted being wrong, but Daniel didn't trust it. Not yet. "So, what are you saying, Derek?" Daniel asked, keeping his tone calm but firm. Derek shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm saying that we could help each other. Partner up. You've got the community, the energy. I've got the resources, the reputation. If we combine forces, we could dominate this city. We could open gyms all over. I was wrong to dismiss you before, Daniel. I see that now. Together, we could be unstoppable." For a moment, Daniel just stared at him, letting Derek's words hang in the air. He had expected something like this, but hearing it out loud was still jarring. Derek was offering a partnership, a chance for massive growth, for money, for power. But that wasn't why Daniel had started this gym. "Let me get this straight," Daniel said slowly, his voice low. "You want me to forget everything you've done, everything you've said, and join forces with you?" Derek's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Yes, I know I've made mistakes, but I'm willing to move past it. We could make something bigger than either of us ever imagined." Daniel exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "You don't get it, do you?" Derek blinked, confused. "What?" "This isn't about money or power, Derek," Daniel said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "This gym isn't just a business to me. It's a community. It's about people who have been shut out, who have been told they don't belong. People like me, people like them." He gestured toward the members working out, who hadn't even noticed the exchange happening near the front door. Derek's face hardened slightly, But Daniel wasn't done. You turned me away from your gym because of the color of my skin. You didn't even try to hide it. You treated me like I was less than, like I didn't deserve to be there. And now, because you're losing everything, you want me to forget that? You want me to stand next to you like none of that happened? Derek's expression shifted, his desperation becoming more apparent. I was wrong, Daniel. I see that now. I was racist, Daniel finished for him. You were racist. And now you're losing members because people don't want to be part of a place built on that kind of attitude. You didn't just lose them because we have a better gym. You lost them because they saw what kind of person you are. Derek's face flushed, but he didn't argue. I built this gym because people like you tried to keep people like me out, Daniel continued, his voice firm. This place stands for everything you and Whitman Elite never did. And I'm not about to partner with someone who only came around because he's scared of losing. I don't need your resources, your reputation, or your money. We're already succeeding without you. Derek swallowed hard, his shoulders sagging slightly. So, that's it? Daniel nodded. That's it. You're not welcome here, Derek. Not now. Not ever. For a moment, Derek just stood there, staring at Daniel as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. But Daniel didn't flinch. He stood his ground, resolute. After what felt like an eternity, Derek exhaled, his shoulders slumping even more. I see. I guess there's nothing left to say. No, Daniel said quietly. There isn't. Derek turned, his steps slow and heavy as he walked toward the door. He paused for a moment, his hand on the handle, as if he wanted to say something else. But then, without another word, he walked out, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through the gym. Daniel stood there for a moment, taking it all in. It wasn't about revenge, and it wasn't about winning. It was about standing up for what was right. Derek Whitman had tried to crush him, had tried to keep him down, and now Derek was the one walking away with nothing. Julia came over, standing beside him. That felt good, didn't it? Daniel nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, it did. You did the right thing, Julia said, her voice soft. He doesn't deserve to be part of what you've built here. I know, Daniel replied, his gaze still on the door. This place isn't for people like him, and now everyone knows it, Julia added. Daniel nodded again, the weight of the moment lifting. He had done it. He had built something real, something that couldn't be bought or torn down by people like Derek. And more importantly, he had stayed true to himself, to his values, and to the community that had supported him every step of the way. As the gym buzzed around him, filled with the sound of laughter, determination, and camaraderie, Daniel knew that the community gym was more than just a place to work out. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when people came together, when they refused to let hate and exclusion define their lives. Derek was gone, and the community gym was here to stay.